good morning. We're so good to have you all back. School without kids is so boring. Let's please go ahead and take our headphones out, please, and our hats off. And on page 366, we're going to start where it says Prelude to Reformation. Now, this is week 19 for our warm-up. We're going to turn our warm-ups in tomorrow. It's been a crazy couple of weeks. If you want to turn your warm-ups in on paper, you can do that tomorrow. If you want to submit them online on the assignment tab, you're welcome to do that as well. Very flexible. Just make sure you get those warm-ups turned in. I have the links to the classes we did while we were out for distance learning on Canvas. So if you open up Canvas, it'll have the YouTube links for each of the days that we were out, and that has our warm-ups. I also have them on our clipboard if you need to make up warm-ups from when you were out. And the is also on Canvas if you need that. Our warm-up today has 3 questions. Who is the best-known Christian humanist? What are some of the complaints against the medieval Catholic Church? And what is an indulgence? An indulgence is one of the complaints against the medieval Catholic Church. Now, we're starting a new section of history today, at least in reading, on the Protestant Reformation. The Protestant Reformation is an important event in history, a process that split Christianity into rival branches. So around the year 1000, Christianity split between Orthodox Christians in the East, in Russia and Greece, and Catholic Christians out of Rome in the West. In 1517, a German priest named Martin Luther is going to nail 95 theses or complaints against the Catholic Church in Germany to a door of the church in Wittenberg, and that's going to start the Protestant Reformation, which splits the Western Church into Catholic and a new branch called Protestant. Most churches in Oklahoma today are Protestant churches. Now, the long-term effects of the Protestant Reformation is that Northern Europe will be mostly Protestant. Eastern Europe will be mostly Orthodox, and Southern Europe will remain mostly Catholic. This is important because countries that were colonized by Northern Europe, like Canada, the United States, or Australia, will also become mostly Protestant. Countries that were colonized by Southern Europe, like Mexico or Brazil or the Philippines, will become mostly Catholic. Let's start on page 366, where it says, Prelude to Reformation. A German priest and professor named Martin Luther began the Protestant Reformation in the early 1500s. Prior developments, such as a widespread intellectual changes during the preceding century, had already set the stage for religious change. And Christian humanism. During the second half of the 15th century, the new classical learning that was part of the Italian Renaissance humanism spread to Northern Europe. From that came a movement called Christian humanism, or Northern Renaissance humanism. The major goal of this movement was the reform of the Catholic Church. The Christian humanists believed in the ability of human beings to reason and improve themselves. They thought that if people read the classics, and especially the fundamental teachings of Christianity in the Bible, they would become more sincerely religious. This religious feeling would bring about a reform of the church and society. The best-known Christian humanist, Brandon, will you read there, please? And this guy's name is Desiderius Erasmus. Desiderius Erasmus.
He also caused that the Catholic Church needed to return to the days during Christianity, especially in order to get to Erasmus, the medieval ages. The religious asking
Relics.
relics, all that.
Thank you, Brandon. Erasmus wanted to educate people in the works of Christianity and worked to criticize the abuses in the church. In his satire, The Praise of Folly, written in 1509, Erasmus humorously criticized society's moral and religious state and called for a simpler, purer faith. In this passage, he satirizes what he views as the folly of clergy who encourage the practice of visiting the shrines of saints. So in the Middle Ages, the Catholic Church placed a heavy emphasis on making pilgrimages or touching or worshiping relics. A relic might be a splinter from the cross that Jesus was crucified on, or a scrap of a robe of a saint from 1,000 years ago. Things like that. It was called the veneration of relics. And Erasmus is making fun of this in this quote. They attribute strange virtues to the shrines and images of saints and martyrs. And so would make their credulous proselytes believe that if they pay their devotion to Saint Christopher in the morning, they shall be guarded and secured the day following from all dangers and misfortunes. If when they first take arms shall come and mumble over such a set prayer before the picture of Saint Barbara, they shall return safe from all engagements. Erasmus sought. Sitzlali, will you read that paragraph, please? Thank you, Sitlali. The need for reform. So Erasmus was a priest, but he pointed out some of the abuses in the medieval church. There were some areas where the church went astray from the Bible during this time period. And so we're going to identify several of these abuses or corruptions in the church. Erasmus and the Christian humanists were not the only ones calling for reform. Popular songs and printed images from the era, as well as court records, show that ordinary people, humanists, and some church leaders were critical of the church. For example, from 1450 to 1520, a series of Renaissance popes were viewed as more concerned with Italian politics and worldly interests than with the spiritual needs of their people. Church officials were viewed as using their church offices to advance their careers and their wealth. At the same time, many ordinary parish priests appeared to their parishioners as ignorant of their spiritual duties. People wanted to know how to save their souls, but many parish priests appeared unwilling or unable to offer them advice or instruction. Kathy, please, while the leaders of the church thank you, Kathy. According to church practice at the time, venerating a relic, such as a scrap of a saint's clothing, could gain someone an indulgence. An indulgence was a document sold by the church and signed by the Pope or another church official that released the bearer from all or part of the punishment for sin. Making pilgrimages to view relics grew popular as a way to acquire indulgences and therefore salvation. Jesus, please, as more people sought certainty. All right, we'll come back to you. Alan, please, as more people sought certainty.
As more people sought certainty of salvation through veneration of relics, collections of such objects were Frederick III, also known as Frederick the Wise, Luther's friend, had amassed more than 5,000 relics. Some people believe the indulgences attached to them could reduce time spent in purgatory by 1,443 years. The church also sold indulgences.
Thank you, Alan. Other people sought certainty of salvation in the popular mystical movement known as the modern devotion. The modern devotion downplayed church practices and stressed the need to follow the teachings of Jesus. The deepening of religious life was done with the Catholic Church. It also helps explain the tremendous impact of Luther's ideas. Okay, let's go ahead and knock it up together now. Question number one is, who was the best known Christian humanist? Desiderius Erasmus. Desiderius, his last name was Erasmus. And he's another one of these figures that you can know by one name, Erasmus. Desiderius Erasmus. Erasmus was big on a couple of things. He liked to kind of poke fun of the Pope and the church bureaucracy. He really liked to make fun of venerating relics, like saying, this is Peter's throne, and people would worship or pray with it, and he made fun of relics, saying that's not in the Bible. And Desiderius Erasmus was also really big on translating the Bible. I want you to make a note here saying translating the Bible. Erasmus believed that the Bible should be translated to the languages that people actually spoke. German, French, Italian, English, not in Latin. Because by this point, no one actually speaks Latin anymore except for the Catholic Church. So people would go to church and have the Bible read to them in Latin, and they couldn't understand any of it. Erasmus translated the Bible into vernacular languages. Now, the medieval Catholic Church strayed from the Bible in certain areas. There are 4 or 5 places where we can clearly see that there were corruptions in the medieval church, things that Erasmus pointed out, and then later on, Martin Luther will point out. What are some of these complaints or grievances against the church? Sorry? So, some say that there's too heavy emphasis on pilgrimage and relics. So there's criticism that the church is focusing too much on making pilgrimages or venerating relics. What else? What kind of lifestyles were the popes and the high church clergy living? Were they poor? No. They were wealthy. So the clergy, people working for the church, lived lavish, meaning wealthy lifestyles. The priests and bishops, the popes, the cardinals were living lavish, wealthy lifestyles. They were not living in poverty. They were growing wealthy from working for the church. What else? what does the book say about, what was the Pope interested in? Good, Shane. The clergy was too political, meaning that the Pope and some cardinals and bishops were more interested in ruling parts of Italy or building their palaces or their giant churches than they were in pastoring the people or helping ordinary people in their spiritual needs. And then there's one more super important grievance or complaint. Indulgences. So the selling of indulgences. Now, understand that the word indulgences in this text is not in the Bible. It's not in there. This is something created by men 1,000 years after the Bible, 1,000 years after Jesus. Indulgences. So an indulgence was a piece of paper. It was a piece of paper that people bought. It was signed by the Pope and it said, "Your sins are forgiven." People who believed in indulgences believed that purchasing an indulgence would lessen your time in purgatory. Many Catholics believed that when you die, you go to a holding state called purgatory. And depending on how well or how poorly you lived your life, you'll spend a little time in purgatory or a lot of time in purgatory before being sent either to heaven or to hell. So, an indulgence was the purchase of a piece of paper saying that your sins are forgiven. You're now saved. But they were expensive. So if you have to be rich to buy an indulgence to have your sins forgiven, what does that mean for poor people? They can't afford it. If you have to buy an indulgence to go to heaven, poor people can't afford to go to heaven. And this is what fired up Martin Luther. And that's what started the Protestant Reformation. Coach Knight's simplified definition of indulgence is the selling of the forgiveness of sins for money. This is not in the Bible. This was a corruption. And logically, if you have to pay a ton of money to buy an indulgence, it meant that poor people could not afford to go to heaven. And that's what Martin Luther's biggest complaint was when he nailed 95 theses or complaints to the church, to the door of the church in Wittenberg, Germany, 1517, which sparked the Protestant Reformation. Okay. You guys can put your warm-ups away and we can prepare to take our next page of notes. Now, like I said, there's a lot of leeway, a lot of flexibility in how you turn your warm-ups in this week. You can turn it in online on Canvas, or you can turn them in on paper tomorrow. Now, unfortunately, I'm going to be out tomorrow. I'm going to be in Tahlequah wrestling all day. So Mrs. Embry, your favorite substitute, will be back. And tomorrow is going to be a work day. I have all of our assignments that we've had this semester up on the board. And I'm going to give you full credit on those through Sunday night. I'm not going to count anything late through Sunday night. If I already did count something late, I'm going to refund those points to you through Sunday, and then after Sunday, we'll reinstitute our late penalties. So tomorrow is going to be a work day. These are all the assignments that we've done so far this semester. They're all on Canvas, and you can get them all turned in for full credit by 11:59 p.m. on Sunday. Tomorrow, spend all day working on these assignments. When we come back in on Monday, I'll be happy to help you with anything you need help with. Shane, where did the Renaissance begin? Where did we say was the cradle of the Renaissance? Florence, good. And Florence is in Italy. Good, Shane. The Renaissance began in Italy, as Shane said, specifically in Florence. Florence was controlled by the Medici family. But then Renaissance ideas of realism and art realism spread from Italy into Northern Europe to places like the Netherlands, Germany, and England and France. So today we're going to be discussing some of the Northern Renaissance. Flanders. Jalen, will you read Flanders, please?
A region that included parts of present-day northern France, Belgium, and the Netherlands was an important industrial and financial center of the northern Europe during the Middle Ages.
So Flanders is a region of France and Belgium. In Flanders, they speak a language called Flemish, which is kind of a cross between French and German, or French and Dutch. Flanders. When we get to World War I, much of the worst of the trench warfare in Western Europe was in Flanders, which is very low-lying and swampy, and it was where some of the worst of the trench warfare occurred in World War I. An engraving. An engraving is a medium of art. Engraving. Marquise, please. Thank you, Marquise. So Albrecht Dürer, the most famous Northern Renaissance artist, was an engraver. He would use acid to engrave designs and artwork on metal plates. Vernacular. Edward, please. Thank you, Edward. When we speak to each other in the hallways, or when you talk to your family at home, you're speaking vernacular English, the way that normal people talk every day. Vernacular is not formal, which means that it changes. And vernacular language is how Latin transformed into Italian in Italy, but Latin transformed into Spanish in Spain. The vernacular, the ordinary language of everyday people, transforms over time. Utopian. Shane, please.
Idealistic or visionary, usually used to describe a perfect society.
Thank you, Shane. Utopia is an ideal place, a perfect world. Anyone know what the term for the opposite of utopia is? Dystopia. Dystopia, which would be the worst world or a horrible world. Utopia, perfect society, ideal world. The printing press. Today we have the internet. But the revolution that happened in the 1500s that changed everything was the invention of the printing press with movable type. We call that the printing revolution. And it exponentially increased the diffusion of knowledge and learning throughout the world, the printing press. So this is a printing press, the same type that Johann Gutenberg made. The first book that Gutenberg printed on his printing press was the Bible. Now imagine, before 1455, every single book that was in existence was hand copied, mostly by monks. So imagine being a monk up in a monastery, it's cold outside, and you're copying the Bible by the light of a candle, letter by letter, word for word, verse for verse, book by book. It took years to copy even one copy of the Bible. It was painstaking. You all know when you're like done writing an essay and your arm hurts? Imagine that times 1,000 copying an entire Bible. So every book in existence prior to 1455 had to be handwritten. The invention of the printing press changes forever. Books. Now you can print thousands of books in the time it would have taken you to copy one handwritten book. The guy that invented this movable type printing press was named Johann Gutenberg. Tyler, please, number one.
In 1455, Johann printed the first complete edition of the Bible using a printing press for removable type in Mainz, Germany.
Thank you, Tyler. Now, in China, they had different types of printing presses, but the big invention here is the movable type. So every letter that is printed is its own individual piece of metal. So every little letter has its own piece of metal, and they're arranged in a frame, then lathered up with ink, and then the paper is pressed onto the letters to give you a copy of that page. That's called movable type. Number two, Nate, please.
Prior to this printing press, books had to be painstakingly hand copied and there were over 2,000 books in there.
Thank you, Nate. And number three, Samantha, please.
By 15,000, there were 8 million books a year.
So the number of books increases exponentially. Has anyone in here ever copied a book by hand or tried to? I tried once in 3rd grade. I didn't make it past the first chapter. It takes forever. It's hard, right? Now printing presses make knowledge much more accessible. So here are some of the long-term effects of the printing press. Oh, number 4, movable type. Ben, please.
Movable type allows printers to quickly compare pages of a book publishing by arranging tiny pre-made metal letters in frame.
Before computers, there were these things called typewriters that had a keyboard, and when you struck the key, a little piece of metal flung onto the paper with that letter. And the printing press used a similar concept. Movable type. Every letter was on its own little piece of metal, and they would arrange whatever they were going to print in this frame, letter by letter, and then print it. They'd print all of those pages first, and then they'd arrange the frame for the next page and print as many pages as they need for as many Bibles as they were going to print. Some of the effects of the printing revolution. A. Is it Isabella?
Yeah.
Isabella, please. Can you read A?
Books were cheaper.
Way cheaper, way easier to make. Thank you, Isabella. B. Sitlali, please. More books, more literacy. Thank you, Sitlali. Kathy, C, please. Thank you, Kathy. So let me expound on that a little bit. I know a lot about what's in this history book, but I don't have every sentence memorized. I've never been to Africa. I've never been to Australia. But how do I know about those places? I read about it in the book. I've never been there, but I read about those places from people who have been there. I wasn't around during the Renaissance, so how do I know about it? I read about it in the book. And so the proliferation of books means that people can now learn about things that they otherwise never would have been able to learn about because they didn't know anyone who'd been there or they'd never been there. So it changes everything. And D, Brandon, please. Thank you, Brandon. All right, let's check out how the printing press actually works. This is a real model of the printing press, that Gutenberg's printing press, with the guy who loves the printing press even more than me. I mean, I love printing presses, but this guy loves it even more than I do.
Handle on it, stuffed it with horsehair and covered it with, guess what, Genza flies, goose skin. So I finally make use of this thing. I don't know why I use goose skin, but it must have worked really well because Bibles that are still in existence are just beautiful. So this is the way he would roll the ink on the ink ball. By turning, rocking, and rolling it on the ink ball. Yes, you know, Gutenberg was the first rock and roller. So he has to rub the ink balls together so that they're both exactly the same. We've got to get the ink perfectly smooth over the whole surface of the ink ball, the same thickness, and evenly distributed. So rolling up the ball can take a little practice and a little skill, and also a little time to get it just right. What do you think? That look pretty smooth? These are Gutenberg lollipops. How about that? Nobody likes licorice.
Well, ever since that.
Okay. Now we have to come straight down with the ink balls to get the ink just on the tops of those letters. If we went like that, it would smear off onto the edge and wouldn't fill the letters in. So coming straight down, we begin to apply the ink to the tops of those letters. First we did this, became known as the beater. Of course, it took a little practice and skill to do this, because we have to get a little ink on every letter. We can't get too much on the letter because that would just fill it in. Okay, I think we're about ready to go. What's the next? Don't interrupt. Okay, now I forgot where I was at.
You're asking us the next step.
Taking the time. What's the next thing he has to have to print on?
Paper.
Well, something to print on. He printed about 180 copies of that first Bible, 40 of them on animal skin, and the rest of them he was able to print on paper. Paper had just been invented in China and come to Europe through Italy. Now the paper was being made for the scribes, and so it was hard and slick, didn't work very well with Gutenberg's oil-based ink. So he had to soften the paper by damping it. I knew that if he just laid a sheet on like this and roll it into there, he couldn't make and roll it into. So he's got to figure out how to print on the other side to line it up exactly. And so here's the answer to that problem, Tippin and the Frisket. We'll open it up here. This is called the Tippin. It's just leather over a frame that provides a place for us to put our paper on. These little points called duckbills position it up and down. And the mark left and right here. Now watch this. These go through the paper. And when he prints on the other side, he puts the paper back on through those same holes. And that gives him perfect alignment between the front and the back. It's still basically the same system that's used on printing presses even today, pen register. Now the Frisket comes down to hold the paper against the Tippin. It's cut out there where we're going to print. It also allows us to lift that paper back up off that sticky type without smearing it or tearing it because it's damp. So we're ready to fold. Put that in the press under the flat. The next thing that happens, which turns the screw and lowers the flat and presses the paper against an inky type. The person that did this was called a very exotic name, a puller. So we're going to have some of you guys and gals be pullers. We're going to do 2 impressions. So let's have, why don't you come and do our first impression? 2 hands up there and pull it towards you as far as you can.
Don't break it. When President Monson was here, he pulled that thing, and I said, don't break it. I brought the house down, I said, he pulled it though. He moved the press a little bit.
Okay, now notice the size of the platen is really quite small. Because the bigger the platen is, the more power it takes to get sufficient impression. So I just printed the 1 page, so I've got to roll it out and get the other page. Now I'd like to have some of the gals do it. How about go for it? Now I'll fill it for you.
Go as far as you can, far.
Come on, let's make it
That's what Gutenberg is.
Oh, that sounds pretty good.
I'm tired.
Yeah, how'd you like to do that all tonight? We have some fun muscles. All right, now we're gonna roll it out. Now listen quiet, and you can hear the Frisket lift that
This is called the
off that sticky
press kiss.
Oh, boy.
We did pretty good.
Wow. We did a pretty good thinking job and a pretty good pulling job.
So that's how the Gutenberg press works. It was revolutionary for the time and made printing books like the Bible about 1,000 times faster and better. Niccolo Machiavelli. Machiavelli wrote a book called The Prince. The Prince is all about how to gain and maintain power. Machiavelli was ruthless in his quest to gain and maintain power. According to Machiavelli, the ends justify the means. You can hurt who you got to hurt, lie who you got to lie to, kill who you got to kill, as long as you're the one who ends up as king. Now, his name, Machiavelli, is still being used as an adjective. Yesterday, I watched this show on YouTube called Breaking Points. I recommend it. And yesterday called China's president, Xi Jinping. She referred to him as Machiavellian, meaning Xi Jinping is all about ruthless power politics. Hurt who you got to hurt, kill who you got to kill in order to become the dictator of China or king. Or Shane, remember the genocide of the Uyghurs going on in China? That would be, once again, justified to maintain power, according to guys like Machiavelli. So The Prince was Machiavelli's book about how to gain or maintain power. As we discussed, the Renaissance started in Italy and gradually worked its way into Northern Europe, to Northern Germany and Flanders and England. Number 1. Jalen, please.
When Renaissance ideas and artistic inspiration spread around to the northern Europe, beginning in the Flanders region of the Netherlands, Belgium, and France, where artists like James Van Peter
So it's Jan van Eyck,
Jan
Peter Bruegel, and Peter Paul Rubens.
and likely holistic scenes.
And number 2, Alan, please.
From Flanders, the Renaissance spread to Spain, France, Germany, and England.
Thank you, Alan. Albrecht Dürer is the most famous of all the Northern Renaissance artists. Why he's wearing a pajama cap, I'm not sure. He was a really good painter and a very good engraver. I believe this is a self-portrait. He painted himself in this one. And Marquise, will you read Albrecht Dürer, please? Thank you, Marquise. Just like Leonardo, he was multi-talented. He was a painter and an engraver. He was the most famous of all the Northern Renaissance artists. Albrecht Dürer. Next is Desiderius Erasmus. Edward, please. Thank you, Edward. Erasmus was all about emphasizing the need to translate the Bible into vernacular languages, languages that real people actually spoke. By the time of Erasmus, normal people did not speak Latin. Normal people spoke Italian in Italy, or Spanish in Spain, or French in France, but they didn't speak Latin. But when they went to church, the priest would read them the Bible in Latin, meaning no one could understand it. And they would preach in Latin, meaning no one could understand it. Could you imagine if you came to school and I read you the book in Latin? You might catch 1 or 2 words here, and otherwise you'd be lost, right? So that's what was going on. And Erasmus said, we've got to translate the Bible into languages people actually speak. Sir Thomas More. Shane, please.
English humanist writer of Utopia spoke about an ideal society in which no one is idle, everyone is educated, everyone lives in peace, and justice is used to end crime, not the criminal.
Thank you, Shane. Sir Thomas More was English, and he was friends with Henry VIII, King of England. We're going to talk a lot about Henry VIII next week. Henry VIII is famous for splitting England off the Catholic Church and establishing his own church, the Church of England. Henry VIII is also famous for having 6 different wives. 3 of those wives were named Catherine, 2 were named Anne. I would get confused for sure and call my wife the wrong name, and then I'd be in trouble. He had 3 of his wives executed, and he also executed his friend, Sir Thomas More, when he criticized him. We're going to talk about Sir Thomas More next week and Henry VIII, who had him executed. And let's not forget William Shakespeare, the most famous and brilliant playwright of all time. Number 1, Tyler, please.
An English poet and playwright who wrote 7 famous plays, which were performed and below Shakespeare's work was written in language that common people can understand and appreciate.
Shakespeare wrote at least 37 world-famous plays, brilliant works of literature that were dramatically performed, and every line rhymes. Is brilliant. Number 2, Nate, please.
Shakespeare's plays added 1,700.
Can you imagine that? He either made up a bunch of these words, or at least he was the first person to write them down. I was thinking maybe he had to invent words for the end of his sentences so that it would rhyme. I don't know. But he's credited with inventing, or at least being the first person to write down 1,700 words in English. Number 3, Samantha, please.
Shakespeare's work has turned into countless adaptations and more.
So his work has been reproduced countless times. Our own drama department still performs Shakespeare periodically and adaptations. His works have been adapted to movies, TV shows, comic books, books, and every other medium that you can imagine. Some of his most famous works include number 4, Ben.
Some of Shakespeare's most famous works are Romeo and Juliet, Julius Caesar, Hamlet, Macbeth, and A Midsummer Night's Dream.
We've all heard of Romeo and Juliet. We've all heard of Hamlet and Macbeth. Those are some of his most famous plays. But we also have seen a lot of Shakespeare we might not even know was Shakespeare. Like, for instance, well, this is the Globe, this is his theater. In one of his plays, he had real cannons on the stage with gunpowder, but no cannonballs, special effects, and they lit the cannon and it exploded, or went off, and it actually caught some straw on fire and burned down the Globe. So this is a replica in the same spot. It's not the original. It's a reproduction of what the Globe would have looked like. So you have the stage, people standing on the floor, and then 3 different balconies of people to watch the play from. West Side Story. West Side Story is a modern adaptation of Romeo and Juliet. West Side Story is Romeo and Juliet set in New York City, and it's set of 2 rival families. It's 2 rival street gangs who fight each other. A boy and a girl from each side fall in love, and then, The Lion King is Hamlet. So the story of Hamlet is reproduced in The Lion King. He's a prince, his father dies, the prince runs away, and eventually he comes back to reclaim his throne. The Lion King is Shakespeare's Hamlet. Hakuna Matata. What do y'all think? I think the cartoon version is better than the real, what do you call that? The real video version? What's that called? Live action version? What do you think? This is a movie, it's an older movie. 10 Things I Hate About You, just another example. 10 Things I Hate About You. This is the guy who was the Joker, Heath Ledger, when he was young. 10 Things I Hate About You, it's a chick flick. It's a, what do you call it? Romantic comedy. 10 Things I Hate About You is Shakespeare's The Taming of the Shrew. And those are just 3 examples. There's countless adaptations of Shakespeare in today's world. Now, tomorrow I'm going to be out. I'm going to be in Tahlequah wrestling all day. Mrs. Embry will be back in. Tomorrow is going to be mostly a work day. You have all of these assignments that we've started this semester. They give you full credit on all of these assignments as long as you turn them in by Sunday night. So tomorrow, use your time in class to work on your assignments. I will be back on Monday. And I'll be happy to help you and assist you with anything you need help on Monday. I'm going to end the Zoom meeting. Bye, guys. And let's please